any one of us, having this discussion or outside of this, forum, has any shred of evidence that shows that you can smoke 0.3% THC of cannabis, they should let us know, and we would shut our mouths.
Well, I mean, very, very interesting point. And Russ, I'll come back to you. I see that you're making a very good point there. I think this is a good point that I want to throw this to Peter Badimak Yaro. You had concerns. Surely your concerns are laid down with what Russ Mubarak has been explaining.
Thank you very much. I think I did say that there has always been a debate between prohibition and regulation, and it will always continue. Somehow, regulation seems to be the way to go as Ghana is following suit. But I think my brother Ras has answered most of the questions. He's saying we are raising and they are not relevant. You are simply saying that even existing laws are not complied with, much as you are doing everything to ensure that people live by the tenets of the legislation that have been laid out, be it driving or whatever. You've also talked about other industries that are there, but not much is being done. And it simply tells you that we are not doing enough with even the opportunities we have. We have varied other opportunities. Take the shea nut industry in Ghana. It's a very, very valuable area. We've tried gold, we have, and even let me, with all respect, bring in the issue of e-levy. What was not said about e-levy? What are we seeing? So what we have said, and people have talked about, we are ignorant, we don't know the difference between what is marijuana and cannabis, the one that gives you, the one that makes you high and could. We know, we understand. What we are saying is this: the threat of not being able to control and distinguish between these two, and people taking advantage of it. You may tell us the law will catch up with the people, but even among researchers, they are saying that even with the same type of cannabis or plant, it all depends on the chemical composition, and you are likely to even have something that you say is harmless, actually giving you what you did not expect. And Ghana, as we know it now, has not got the structures to support people, as I did say, who may, for whatever reason, get hooked up, become addicts, and need rehabilitation. I work in the sector, and I know the kind of rehabilitation facilities that we have in Ghana. And the government or public addiction centers are either nothing to write home about or not existent. So whilst you are doing this, thinking about your economic interest of raking in millions, I was thinking that I would have seen in the law saying that for this reason, we are going to set up XYZ facilities to support those who would eventually, for whatever reason, still go in to take this substance, which may predispose them to needing professional support.
I mean, let me throw that to Humphrey Kofi. Humphrey, I mean, you run a mental health NGO. Do you associate with the point Mr. Yaro is making, and you have any fears that this law that have been passed, I mean, potentially has this ramification that we could regret in the future?
Yes, thank you very much to your viewers as well as your listeners. Indeed, I support the argument made by Peter Yaro. I think that those proponents of this bill were looking at the financial benefits rather than the health and social implication of this bill. I would dare ask, then they should tell us by what baseline statistics they have to suggest that if this bill is passed and it becomes cannabis becomes a productive venture, what is the expectation in terms of revenue? What are we trying to say? That we did a baseline. We thought that by projection, by this year, we should be, raking in such an amount. Indeed, even if we anticipate that we're going to make some money, have we thought about the benefit? The health implications, the social implications over the financial implication? And there is nothing to suggest that we are really going to even make any money which is beyond what the other resources we have in Ghana are giving us, i.e., the bauxite, the gold are giving us. What is the assurance that we're going to make such money? If you go to the Accra Psychiatric Hospital and other psychiatric hospitals and you try to find out those who have abused various substances, you might not even find cannabis. But students in recent times in the second cycle institutions have found alternatives that will still satisfy them if they were taking cannabis, i.e., some they inhale the super glue that we have. Some have them in their chop boxes and their trunks. They just inhale it. And you know how if you open up a super glue, you have some strong
strong scent.
Scent that can really carry you away. So already before this thing had been legalized, they are finding alternative ways of still satisfying their desire to take cannabis. Now we are saying that we're going to introduce cannabis and use a pedestal, argument to say that it's going to rake in so much money. But if you have actually done a good analysis of what are the health implications, what are the social implications, do we have that? Or we are just predicting that this is going to bring us money? I mean, the weight of that argument is already falling flat based on the fact that we have students who have taken in other substances, making sure that they want what they want to, they get what they desire to have, which are not even necessarily cannabis. So cannabis now comes in to justify the fact that, we can use this one because it's legalized. And in any case, those institutions that are supposed to control, what is the level of control? How are they able to control that?
Ras, I see that you are itching to make a point. You can make that, Ras.
Yes, indeed. If he doesn't mind me coming in, he asked some questions, and my response to that is that, can you imagine what would happen in our country if there's a gridlock? If government, this or any other government, is unable to pay teachers and nurses and doctors what is due them at the end of the month, there will be anarchy. That's what's going to happen in our country. People would commit suicide. It would drive people crazy. Okay, this was not arrived at based on economic considerations alone. And we've made the point time and again that people should take their time to understand the difference. Industrial cannabis is synthetic. It cannot get anybody high. Read my lips. You cannot smoke industrial cannabis. How loudly must we say this before it sinks in? Now, you could raise the issue of law enforcement, which is legitimate, and insofar as I'm concerned, this should offer all of us an opportunity to embark on public education that should be spearheaded by the Narcotics Control Commission to ensure that people understand clearly what this is about. And I've said it again, that in all probability, you would have one or two bad nuts, the Mensa in the family who would say he's going to go for a license and would do the opposite. We're talking about industrial cannabis, not recreational cannabis. So this argument about people inhaling super glue, that's not coming. If people are inhaling super glue, it's a failure on the system. If people are abusing drugs, it's parents who have failed, it's the school system which has failed, it's the chiefs, opinion leaders, assembly members in our respective communities who have failed. But you can't use the failure of the school system, parents, etc., and say that the state must not look at avenues of generating revenue.
Yeah, so Ras, you make a point about revenue, and I think I want to come back to you again on that because Mr. Peter Yarrow and Humphrey have all raised the point about e-levy, for instance. It was said to be raising 3 billion Ghana cedis every year. We got to a point where making barely 100 million. So I'll come to you on that, Ras. Briefly, I just want to go to other guests so that I can come back to you on that important point you're making there. So, I mean, Karim, you're a businessman. When I spoke to you early on, the point you made was that you can't even wait to cash in on this. But surely the points that Mr. Humphrey, Kofi, and Mr. Yaro are making about the potential for abuse, surely it must be raining in your mind and you may be having second thought, or you really want to just go all in for this.
All right. Thank you very much, Kwaku Asante, and then of course to your listeners, a very good evening to all of you. And yes, of course, I said earlier that I cannot wait to cash out on this move. But then also as a businessman, I'm very much concerned about ethics. I'm very much concerned about safety of people as well. So, we do ethical business. We don't just get up and look at the monetary aspects of things and forget that there's a need to also, take a cursory look at the impact or the effect of whatever business it is that you run on the people that you seek to serve. And as Honorable Ras Mubarak rightly said, we are talking industrial cannabis. We are talking, cannabis that we are going to be using, in pharmaceutical industry, cannabis that we are going to be using in the healthcare, in the beauty industry. This is not the typical cannabis that we find people smoking on our streets that gets them high. And for me, I'm looking at it from this perspective that let's look at whether we like it or not, there are still people in Ghana that grow cannabis anyway. Some of them get caught, some of them, at the end of the day, sometimes are able to go scot-free. But if the parliament of that is a representation, that represents the interests of the people of this country, says that we are giving people the license, whoever is interested, we are giving the license to be able to cultivate a certain type of cannabis for industrial purpose, for health use. What do you think is going to happen? What it means is that we are going to be redirecting the focus and attention of people, towards growing this new kind of cannabis that we want to be seeing grown. And so instead of having to hide in the dark and do things that ordinarily they're not supposed to do, now you're presenting them with another opportunity. And for me, I see this as an avenue to create jobs. An avenue to create jobs for agronomists, an avenue to create jobs for drivers, an avenue to create jobs for farm hands, an avenue to create jobs for laborers. I mean, name it, Kwaku Asante. This is a huge industry. And when you even look at the global statistics on the revenue, that we are likely to rake in as a country by mere virtue of the fact that we have decided to toe this path. I think that it's in the positive light. And let me also bring light to the issue that as much as people are concerned about the other effects that it may have, it also falls within the hands of government, if I should say, or the people or the regulatory bodies to ensure that monitoring and evaluation is done properly, so we do not get anyone sneaking and planting what they are not supposed to plant. Even though those definitely be people who would hide and do some of these things, but we need to ensure that regulation is properly done. We also need to ensure that at the end of the day, these people are going to be taxed. Maybe some components of the taxes that we are going to be raking from this dedicated towards putting up more mental health facilities, dedicated towards providing more medication for mental health facilities in our country and all of that. And so at the end of the day, I think it's a win-win. We just need to sit down and properly look at all of these things so that everyone are laid. But I see this as a big opportunity for us as a country.
Big opportunity.
Pharmaceutical industries use cocaine. People. So what's the big deal? At the end of the day, it's a win-win. We just need to. I know we have a lot of us have concerns in Ghana with when it comes to regulation, but I'm sure that this time around, if we take time and look properly, I think we should be able to make headway as far as this is concerned.
Force, you are in the United Kingdom where some of these have been legal for so many years now. Karim just ended on a point by saying this is a big opportunity. Is that a view you share, or you agree with Mr. Yaro and Mr. Kofi?
I thank you very much, Kwaku, for trying to get my side of the story. I really applaud the Parliament for passing this bill, and I share slightly in everybody's view, because this is something that we need to actually pay full attention to understand the ins and outs of it. The UK has legalized medicinal and research cannabis for ages. However, what the UK has also gone forward to do is make sure that it has put processes in place that curtail the bad side of the growing processes. So, for example, in the UK, the police force have drones that they can actually fish out places where they're growing cannabis in houses and then burn them down. And because they're not the legal forms that they're meant to be growing, and they burn them down. What I'm a bit concerned about is what processes are going to be in place to actually make sure that what we have set out to do is what we end up doing in the end. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to the business side of things, cannabis is the biggest thing. We know that globally it is going to be in the next by 2030 it's going to be raking in. It's going to be about $700 billion project in the whole world. So it will be good for Ghana to tap into it. Some of the money, this law that they've passed, is going to actually attract investment into Ghana. How are we going to manage that investment is very, very important, because in some countries, for example, in the Netherlands, where cannabis, people think it's illegal to actually smoke cannabis in Netherlands. No, it is illegal. They just give you the space to use it recreationally, but it is illegal to smoke it there. But they just allow you space to do that. Policing of this law, this bill will be very, very paramount. Other than that, we're going to get serious problems, because if we do not hold on to the limits of the law in which actually specify the type of cannabis you're growing, then we will be losing loads of good standing society members. Also, let me just touch a little bit on the mental health issues, things that some of the panelists have actually mentioned. Mental health issues come from loads of things, and we can't just focus the drug abuse or the substance abuse side of it alone. It could be due to loads of different things, and mental health encompasses loads of things. I.e., in the UK, some of the money that they use in the cannabis growing businesses are geared towards, and it's a quota that has been put down for these building of these facilities. Some of them are used for building and going into research to find out the pharmaceutical or the pharmacological uses of cannabis, which is actually helping export loads of disease-curing drugs out into the world. So the business side of it is good, but in my eyes, I think that we need to pay attention to really enforcing the law to make sure that the right things are done. And that as a Ghanaian, as a British boy and a Ghanaian, I really do worry, because we do not enforce laws properly in Ghana.
Interesting. Ras Mubarak, surely that is why people are concerned. Enforcement, you make a law that says you can cultivate 0.3 THC. Then people are doing more than that, and people are using it for recreation already. In fact, at the time the law was passed in 2020, there was a burst of news out there as though recreational use had been legalized. Surely the point about enforcement is big, knowing how we enforce law in the country. Just the point that everyone has been making.
Well, not quite, but I would agree with Force that we've got to put in place mechanisms, and there are indeed mechanisms. So the law is different.
Ras, if I may interject, I really respect the fact that you said mechanisms. It's unfortunate that when the law was passed, they did not state those things.
Because you don't put those things in the law. You put them in a regulation.
That's the point. The regulations has not been written yet, has it?
If I may. So the Ministry of Interior will definitely incorporate, all of the suggestions that are come and that would come into the LI, which is yet to be brought before Parliament. And the thing is, alcohol, for instance, is legal in our country. Research and the data is out there for anyone who is interested. The harmful effects of alcohol far outweigh the harmful effects of recreational cannabis. And no one is even talking recreational cannabis at this point. At this point, what the Parliament of Ghana has done is to give us an opportunity to tap into a booming industry where we could generate revenue, where factories that will be set up here will be paying corporation taxes, will be paying income taxes, will be employing people. I mean, look at the number of young graduates up and down the country. It's miserable that able-bodied men would finish school and for years would not have jobs to do, when these factories could be employing security officers, accountants, marketing staff, HR staff, chemists, to turn these things into various other things. So it's exciting for Ghana. And I understand the level of, nervousness by people who have expressed opposition to this. Even at independence, there were people who still felt it was not necessary for Ghana to have, independence at the time we had our independence in 1957. So naturally, you have people expressing fear about things they don't know about things that are new, and that is understandable. But there are safeguards in the law. The safeguards are that you are to acquire a license before you can, cultivate cannabis that is 0.3% THC. And there are punishments prescribed in the law for those who go contrary to, what the law prescribes. Another example I would like to cite is the fact that nobody is interested in getting our kids high. We're looking at a situation where we can make bricks. Look at how expensive cement is. We can make bricks from cannabis, where we can make hair products from cannabis, where we can make paper. I mean, we're cutting down trees to make paper, and today that has become so unsustainable that is degrading our environment. If there are alternative ways and sources of doing this, I think we should all be excited about it. No one wants to see our kids high. No one wants to have our kids in mental homes. And I think, Force made a brilliant point about the fact that people who are experiencing mental health challenges don't get these things exclusively, from the use of drugs. As a matter of fact, when people are sitting home and not having jobs, that can even give them, depression and other mental health conditions more than even using, some of the substances that people tend to use. So there are underlying problems that lead to mental health that have absolutely nothing to do with industrial cannabis. And all we are asking is for people to take a step back and look at the facts as they are today, that we are facing monumental challenges. We are on the cusp of losing so much in our country.
Russ, I get you on that. I want to ask you this question before I go to my other guest. Listen, the potential for cannabis and the economy is high. I'm looking at this data that we mined here at Joy News. The 2023 projected worth of cannabis on the market alone is $7.1 billion. $7.1 billion. $6.3 billion is for recreational use and $800 million is for medicinal cannabis. In fact, if you look at country specific, Nigeria making about 3.74 billion, South Africa 1.70 billion, 900 million. So the potential is huge, and you already alluded to that. Almost everyone has spoken to that. But how do you respond to, in this country, e-levy, for instance, how we thought it was going to be something big, it didn't. So many things where we had good potential.
That is completely a non-starter. You don't compare, e-levy, to.
But I guess the underlying issue is we had so much potential for a lot of things. We had great expectations, and we did not get it. We got something else. So we won $1 billion from cannabis, and then we ended up getting something else, negative, for instance.
The decriminalization of cannabis by Parliament, which the president, I believe, would sign into law with alacrity, is one of those things that you have had bipartisan support from the Parliament of the Republic. We are not even talking about how MPs from both sides of the aisle have been unanimous, in their support of this thing. Look, if we don't critically look at other streams of getting the country running, we're going to go down the abyss, and nobody wants to have that kind of situation on our hands. The question, I'm sorry?
if I may, I just wanted to actually
Sure.
address one point that Kwaku made. Kwaku, there's something called constantly looking at other avenues to bring in streams of money into government or into the country. Even in the UK, where I live now, just yesterday, after the government decided to give some people a pay rise, their public sector pay rise, it said it was going to do so by increasing the visa fees for people coming into the country. Don't tell me that it's not expensive for somebody in Ghana coming into the UK paying X amount of fees to come in. So government will always look for other ways and means of getting money into their coffers. But the bit I'm a little bit worried about is the fact that we need to learn how to draw a process that divides the money that we generate from an industry properly to actually tackle some of the basic needs that may or may not happen.
Of course, legitimate concerns. I mean, we've had calls, especially those of us from the NDC, and economists up and down the country will tell you that there's a lot of waste in the system. You know, if government could plug all of these holes, that adds up. But that certainly would not be enough, obviously, to do the sort of things that we wish to have in our country. I mean, infrastructure, hospitals, roads, schools, you name it, you know. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm just hopeful and praying that people who are opposed to this would take a soothing medicament, you know, and look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that there will be jobs. Without jobs, people will get depressed. You would have more people ending up in mental hospitals as a result of joblessness than you would have people, you know, ending up in, you know, mental hospitals because of smoking weed or cannabis or marijuana. That is fact.
I'm sorry. As much as I do side with some of the things you're saying, I don't think you can actually draw that inference, because let me be very honest, we can't draw. It's hypothetical.
No, it is fact.
So somebody who's of a science background, can we not just make that simple inference? Because it just doesn't really educate the public well, because you can't actually draw that inference, or can you?
Are you telling me that when people are going through enormous difficulties, they don't get depressed? Is that what you're saying?
I never said that.
Yeah, but that's
but you can't say that people are more likely to be depressed because they don't have a job and than when they smoke any substance abuse. That's the statement you make, and that's something I'm finding really hard to actually accept.
And that's a fact. You know, when people are hungry, you know what they do? When they are hungry, they become very angry. You know, look at the COVID, during COVID, you know, the number of cases of abuse in homes in Africa and in Europe, including the UK where you live. You know, incidences of spousal abuse went up, right? Because people were not making more money as they would have been before COVID. People started getting depressed. They started having mental health issues.
Just to put you on the straight line, I'm sorry, you are very, very wrong on that. Because during COVID times, the same problems that we have during Christmas breaks, we have the same problems times 3 in the UK during COVID times. Because
I'm telling you,
we live in a system where people do not tend to interact with their families that much. And so when there is that process where people tend to live in the same roof, then you get that problem. So you can't just draw those simple inferences because they're not drawn. I am not going to allow you to do that, because it just doesn't really sit well.
Unless clearly, if I may, just jot down the point, you know, because it's becoming overly disruptive. Unless you haven't been following what's happening, you know, in the UK, okay? Where during COVID, facts, Kwaku, let your producers check this for you. Cases of depression, cases of, you know, difficulties in people's homes as a result of the pressures that COVID brought, you know, were so high all over the world, all right? And I'm saying to you that in instances where people cannot get by, their chances of suffering mental health issues is even higher than somebody going to get a high. But we're not even talking about getting a high. That is where I want us to move away from. This bill is about industrial cannabis. Simpliciter is about ensuring that farmers grow cannabis so that they can supply factories who would make papers, who would make cooking oil, who would make hair products, who would make bricks, and so on and so forth. The things that we need.
And then we can benefit from it. Ras, thank you very much for that. I'll come back around the table and we'll try and wrap up the conversation. But there's some good point to really go on social media and see what people are talking about. My colleague Maxwell Agbagba, aka Mazi Odumodu, has joined me in studio. Master, what do you stand on this thing? Do you agree to the legalization, or you have some different point?
No, I agree with industrial and medicinal use.
You don't agree for recreational?
No, not for recreational. I think it's been long overdue. Some states in the U.S. are already cashing in. Colorado, for instance,
it's big.
Is cashing in big on this. So sometimes when I see the Narcotics Control Commission,
they're banning all of that. I'm like, what are you doing?
We're talking about the medicinal and industrial
sometimes
use,
I think,
not recreational.
Let's say you go and ban this, heaps of it. People are around. What's going on? They are getting high indirectly. I mean, very good point. Also, we had a poll on Twitter. What did the poll say, and what is the result?
So the question we asked was, are you convinced the passage of the law to permit the growing of cannabis for industrial and medicinal purposes is in your best interest? Now, yes, we had 73%. 73% saying that yes, they are convinced the passage of the law to permit the growing of cannabis for industrial and medicinal purposes is in their best interest. And then we had no, 27%. So 73% yes, 27% no. We have some comments coming through. This one here from Ahanta Kane, he says, of course, permitting its domestic consumption with proper regulations won't be bad. It's just a herb like any other plant. Interesting. This one here from Joseph Ajiman, he says, I think for its medicinal purposes, it is in the right direction. And then Stephen Chachu Anyigban says, getting license to start this venture is going to be difficult since it solely resides to the minister. As usual, the ordinary farmer may not benefit. Sarah Abe says, long overdue. Setoforia Champon says, long overdue. Joseph Akasokre says, gold, diamond, timber, and the many resources that God bless us with couldn't solve our problems. How much will we, he said we, yes, how much will we solve our problem? We'll wait to see. And then the last one, a lot of them. So let me just finish with Anthony. Anthony says, with all these kinds of natural resources, we couldn't survive. Hey, Ghana. And Don Jaira says, why not? If Canada can generate about $3 billion annually from it, why not Ghana?
Why not Ghana? Very interesting perspectives. Maxwell, thank you very much. Ras, we're just about wrapping up. I want to start with you before I go around the table for brief comments to wrap up this conversation. You have this large majority of Ghanaians, at least by this poll, who support this, but there is still some considerable opposition out there. Why is it so? Is it because probably we did not have a big conversation, national conversation, before doing this in Parliament?
There was a national conversation. I mean, MPs are representatives of the people, and MPs are supposed to perform surgeries in their respective constituencies and bounce by, their respective constituents what is happening in Parliament. If it followed my activities in the 7th Parliament, most of the bills that came before Parliament, I would discuss it even on social media, including this particular issue. The second point I want to make, Kwaku, already there are industrial products made from cannabis in the market. I mean, go to the hairdresser salon. You have products like Kuza, which is good for hair enhancement, and people whose hair, as bald as mine, have attempted to use Kuza to get, their hair growing. Medicinal cannabis has been proven to be good for the eye, even though not ideal for curing glaucoma, but it reduces or lowers the pressure on the eye. So already there are products made from cannabis, industrial cannabis, that are in the system. We've never had a problem with it. So if we are importing all of these products into the country and storing them in our hairdresser salons and our pharmacies, why don't we harness the potential and create more jobs and get more young people off the streets and generate more revenue that would build more roads, more schools, more hospitals for our people up and down the country?
Very interesting points there, Ras Mubarak. Thank you very much. So, Karim, I'm sure from everything that you've heard so far, you are really still going ahead with your plan to go out there and cultivate.
My land is ready. My business registration certificates are ready. All I need is to get a license, and voila, I'm ready to go. So I'm still in it fully. I'm looking at the potential, as I mentioned, that it has as far as job creation is concerned. There are so many unemployed youth, and this would be, another perfect opportunity for us to be able to create jobs, within that sector for young people in this country. So I'm game. I'm ready.
You're really game. Thank you very much, Karim. Humphrey, I mean, you've heard a lot. Do you still stand where you stand in opposition to this bill, which has just been passed? Ras Mubarak says he expects that President Akufo-Addo will sign it into law with alacrity. Hello, Humphrey. I might have lost Humphrey there. Mr. Yaro, are you there?
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Yaro.
Yeah, this is Humphrey.
Okay. Humphrey, do you still stand where you stand?
The proponents of this bill are making so much, if you like, presumptive conclusions that this bill is going to yield so much and all that. Look, we are just going to open the floodgates. If you are saying that we are going to grant licenses for industrial production, if somebody takes the license and decides to go into the village somewhere and intersperse or interplant with the recreative one because it's of high demand, how would you know? Because it's of course of high demand, and because the person has a license, he has that authority to grow it. In the developed countries where these things are being granted, it is impacting on the social life of the people. Even in the UK that was cited, go to their psychiatric hospitals, though they have the best of facilities, you find people abusing these same industrialized cannabis, so-called, and they have always this is for industrial purpose, but people are abusing it. Ras Mubarak was saying that you cannot take in that because it's of a low quality and all that. Who said that people are not ready to explore? We are just opening the floodgates and saying that you can take this one even though it is meant for industrial purposes. And I think that we have to rethink the whole process again because of the social impact. Thank you.
Right, rethink the whole process because of social impact. Really brilliant conversation we've had. I'm sure this conversation will go on right after the president probably signed this bill into law. We wait to see if there will probably be another legal challenge at the Supreme Court. But it's been a very good and very interesting conversation around narcotics and Narcotic Control Commission bill that has now been passed into law, which will allow for the cultivation of cannabis for industrial and medicinal purposes. I must indicate it is 0.3 THC. That is the allowable limit. That is what the Interior Minister can give license for. Thank you very much, Humphrey Kofi. He runs an NGO, mental health NGO. Ras Mubarak, a former MP, he was a member of parliament when the initial bill was passed before the SC struck out Section 43. It is now having been inserted back after parliament passed that. Radams Karim is a businessman who says he can't wait to cash in and force Ghanaian living in the United Kingdom shared some brilliant perspective about how the UK has been able to juggle and is warning about being cautious. And then Peter Yaro is also really passionate about this. So my name is Kwaku Asante. Thanks for your messages that you shared on this brilliant conversation. We'll continue again next week with another brilliant conversation. Please have a good weekend.